Now that we've got our lighting sorted, let's switch off the RT mode and fire off a render to see how things are looking. And the first thing we need to do is fix these seams that are showing up on the edges of our texture maps on the character. So to keep things running nice and fast, let's just solo only the objects in our scene that we'll be working on. So we'll solo the character, the clothes, and the scene objects, so we can keep the camera and the lighting. And that's definitely clearing up a bit faster now. Let's also switch over to our character materials tab, and we'll start by tweaking some of these. And so we can see those materials a bit better, let's also set up another camera a bit closer to our subject. So let's duplicate this camera and rename it to closer, and we'll look through there. Then we'll switch over to the viewport, and I'll zoom in a bit closer to her face. About there should do. So back in the render view, we can see what might be causing that problem with the texture seams. It looks like it might be because the bump is way too intense. So I'll need to tweak these skin materials. So let's start with the face material. But you'll notice that texture is repeated across quite a few of these different materials, which we don't really need. The fewer materials, the better really. So let's merge some of these together first. So for this texture, I want to keep the face and the lips as two separate materials, but I'll grab the face and holding Alt, I'll drag it onto these other duplicates, like the ears, for example, to merge those together. And we're basically just replacing the ears material with the face material. So all that geometry will share that one face material instead. And we'll do that again onto the other face material, which is the eye sockets. And I'll just bring our face material back over here again. Then we'll do the same process to the leg materials. We'll hold Alt and drag that onto the similar toenails material, so we can control both of those with the one material as well. Then the same with the teeth and mouth materials. And actually, because our character has her mouth closed, we don't see the teeth or the inner part of the mouth. So in this case, we could probably just delete this material because we don't want anything in our scene that we don't need. Then we'll merge the arms into fingernails. Then for the eye materials, you might like to keep some of these separate, especially the iris, because it'll give you the flexibility to come in here and add a color correct node after the diffuse map. And if we shift the hue and maybe increase the gamma as well, you can easily recolor the eyes like so, which can be handy to make your renders a little bit more interesting. But for our render, I'll just stick to the original eye color. So to reduce the amount of materials again, I'll just merge these together, which brings us back to the original brown eyes. And finally, we'll grab the eye moisture and merge it with the similar cornea and the second eye moisture material. So now that we've reduced these materials down to just what we need, let's sort out the intensity of our bump maps. So let's grab the face material and take a look at how this has been set up. And we've got a bump blender here, which is blending a normal map and a bump map together. And if we take a look in these, you can see that the height scale is set pretty high. So let's just grab our normal map and reduce that to 0.01 and the bump map to 0.02. And straight away, that's looking a lot better. But we can still see the seam back here, so we'll have to fix all the other materials the same way. So we'll grab the torso material and we'll decrease the normal map and bump values in here as well. So 0.01 for the normal map and 0.02 for the bump. And as soon as we've done that, we're no longer getting that seam at the back of the head. So we'll do the same for the lips. 0.01 and 0.02. And that's looking good. So let's switch back to our main camera. And this is all looking good now. We just need to do the same to the arms as well. So I'll quickly do that. And that's that sorted. We've also got the legs material that we could fix as well, but because the legs aren't going to be visible in our final render, we could just delete this material as well. But what I might do instead is just disconnect the bump blender. So the bump on the legs isn't calculated, which will also speed up the render slightly. Okay, so let's move on to the eyes. Let's switch back to our close-up camera. And you can see our eyes aren't looking great either. We've got some fireflies here, and the eyes are also looking a bit bloodshot. And again, I think that's because the bump is way too intense on those as well. So let's grab our merged pupils material. And this time we can probably just remove the bump completely rather than decreasing the intensity, because we're not going to be rendering the eyes up close. So let's remove that extra detail by just disconnecting this as well. And that looks better. We can also start using our render region tool as well to get a faster render on the area we're working on. And I can still see a few fireflies on here. And I think that's because our eye moisture material, which is applied to the geometry over the eyes, also has an extreme bump map. So let's disconnect that as well. And now those eyes are rendering faster and looking much better. And finally, we'll move on to the eyelashes here, which doesn't have any bump, just an alpha map here. But I think looking at this, those eyelashes have imported fine, so we probably don't need to tweak those. Let's just turn them off and on again to check. So that's off, and that's on, which I think looks fine. So we'll switch back to our main camera and disable the render region. And our scene is definitely rendering faster now. So we could leave this as is for our character skin, but we'll take this one step further in the next lesson by adding a bit of subsurface scattering. One thing I just wanted to mention before we move on is that sometimes when we convert materials from DAZ to Redshift, like we did earlier, you might find if we go into one of these, like the face for example, and check the reflection map that's been imported and piped into the reflection color here, for some reason, it's actually put a duplicate of our diffuse map instead in here, which is the same as this map here. But if we take a look at the collected files from our imports in the project folder, you can see here's our diffuse map, but we've also got this specular map, which really should be in place of the diffuse map in our reflection channel. So if that happens to you as well, you can easily just replace that map by dragging that into here to overwrite that. And you'll need to do that to the other skin texture maps as well. So I'll just grab the specular map for the torso as well and replace this. So just a heads up if you run into the same thing, but in my experience, this only happens on some models from the store. And it really just depends how the materials have been set up back in DAZ. So I'll go ahead and fix those, and I'll see you in the next lesson.